Just a few days ago, I told you that these tanker attacks on Russian oil tankers or Russia-linked oil tankers, though a lot of these are flagged by other countries, I said that that could be a major tipping point. This could be a major provocative action by Ukraine that may have significant consequences. And now the consequences are here. We're now hearing from Russia what they say the consequences will be. And this is going to be provocative for sure. We're going to touch briefly on what are legitimate targets in war and what are not. And what we're going to see here is that oil tankers, unless you can make some sort of case that the oil is actually going to be used for weapons or tanks or something like that, if it's going to resupply military, then it's a legitimate target. But if it's just an economic good, then that's not a target. That is not a target of war, at least not according to the United Nations. And up till now, we haven't seen Ukraine targeting the oil tankers of Russia, and we haven't seen Russia targeting the oil tankers of Ukraine. And we haven't seen Russia targeting the oil tankers of France, Germany, and the UK. But that may be about to change, friends. This is a big one. Russia and the United States are in major talks to end the Ukrainian war. We look like peace could be just over the horizon. Legitimate talks are happening. Russia is making noises like they think that this is possible. United States is making noises like they think it's possible. And this is really going to the point that this could be a legitimate structure that then gets foisted upon Ukraine. Ukraine probably will not agree to this, at least initially, until the United States twists its proverbial arm pretty hard. But they're not really the kingmaker. The United States created Ukraine out of whole cloth. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and research that one just a little bit. But the United States overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine and installed their own government using the CIA. And there haven't been elections recently either. And the ones that happened before that were not internationally certified because they were super fake. Anyway, Russia has launched this special military action against Ukraine and has seized a whole bunch of territory, most of the territory which they said they were going to take. And now with the peace deal on the table, Europe, of course, wants a seat at the table. Europe, on the other hand, seems to want war, more war. And so they are feeding long-range missiles, aircraft that can be used to launch long-range missiles, to Ukraine, and are provoking and encouraging Ukraine to engage in more provocative actions as they can in order to try to get Russia to do something that will play on the news. And Russia is saying that they are getting to the point where they are fed up with Ukraine breaking the rules of war and its allies hiding behind the sham of not being engaged in the war. When you sell somebody a long-range cruise missile, you teach them how to use it, or even is being alleged, special operations members from your military are actually the ones operating it. That's a whole nother thing. But then you provide satellite imagery, targeting information, you tell them which target to hit, and you then have your soldiers pushing the button. Now, I don't care if they're sitting on a base that has a little Ukrainian flag over it. If it's British personnel firing a British missile, according to British intelligence provided by the intelligence services and satellites, and then is being damage assessments being done by the British. At what point can we just say it more clearly that this is the British attacking that ship? Well, we're in that situation right now where Russia is fighting, as they put it, all of NATO. So what kind of consequences can we be anticipating here? First, because of these 4 attacks on Russian oil tankers, or like I said, flagged in different countries, they're either owned by Russia or they're linked to Russian companies or something. 1, that they will continue and increase their strikes on Ukrainian ports. Like I said, an oil tanker, if it's going to resupply troops or military vessels, then that's a legitimate target in warfare. If it's going to be sold to some other country, like it's going to, Lithuania or who knows where, somewhere in Africa, Angola or something, it's going to Angola and they're going to sell the oil. And then it's going to come back, pick up more oil and go. You may think that that's a legitimate target of war, but it's not. According to the UN, that is a war crime. And when you add onto it empty ships that are allegedly going to go to Russia to pick up oil and then go somewhere else, you get kind of almost like it gets worse. So we have, Ukraine has now attacked 4 Russian oil tankers. Now, unlike what we saw over in the Bab al-Mandab Strait, where the Yemenis have attempted to attack ships, often very unsuccessfully. It's fairly easy for a modern military with decent equipment to actually attack a oil tanker. They're not exactly hard to hit, right? And once you hit them, they have a tendency to sink and burn, okay? Or burn then sink. So it's not super impressive that you can sink an oil tanker. The reason why we haven't had more oil tankers sunk up to this point is because both sides have agreed to the UN understanding of what are legitimate targets and what are not. Over the course of this war, things have been added to the list of things that are legitimate targets. We've seen both sides kind of escalate things one way or another. Power plants are generally considered by most countries to be not legitimate targets in war. But one country out there decided that power plants were legitimate targets in war, and this country, when we attacked Serbia, we're like, hey, let's take down the power grid, because the power grid's used to support the military. And the whole world's like, you can't do that. And we just said, we did it. And since then, whether power plants and energy infrastructure is a legitimate target in warfare has been debated. But the United States has fairly often stood on that ground. We attacked the power plants in Iraq back in the day when we invaded them. So the United States has fairly long held that those are legitimate targets. And while both Russia and Ukraine avoided power plants at first, recently they're just punching each other in the face when it comes to those power plants right and left. There's no holds barred left at this point. Port facilities, refineries have been considered have been legitimate targets ever since Ukraine launched a whole bunch of attacks on Russian refineries. They also attacked Russian oil terminals. Russia retaliated against Ukrainian ports. So apparently more attacks on Ukrainian ports are coming. Next thing, they said that if these attacks continue, that Russia will start targeting Ukrainian ships. And this is a big deal because remember, like I said, these Russian tankers weren't flagged as Russian tankers. They weren't waving the little Russian flag. They were waving other country flags. They were owned by or they were being operated by Russian companies, or they were some linkage to Russia. Well, if they apply that same metric to Ukrainian vessels, basically any ship that goes into a Ukrainian port could be declared to be a combatant or a legitimate military target, including grain ships. Even though we have a grain deal in the Black Sea, that could be endangered by this as well. Russia needs to get its oil out a whole lot more than it needs to get its grain out. So that could be something that's changing shortly. Bigger than that, they've said that they are not planning or wanting a war with Europe, but that they are ready for war with Europe, saying that they would, if they do get into a fight with Europe, that there wouldn't be anyone left to negotiate with. Now, it doesn't take too much of an imagination to figure out what exactly Russia just threatened to do. And yes, that is to turn Europe into a sea of glass, as people used to call, what would happen if you nuked the Middle East and all the sand melted and turned into a sea of glass. Well, Russia is basically threatening that against Europe and say, we will nuke Europe so that there are no survivors. Considering that they have the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, I think Europe should maybe pay attention, because what they're doing is provoking the bear significantly. Now, Europe has some nukes as well. Both France and the UK have nuclear weapons. They do have some nukes, and they do have several submarines that have nuclear ballistic missiles on them. So they do have some legitimate counterstrike potentially to Russia. Now, Russia could potentially sink those ships. If they do, they would take out most of Europe's nuclear deterrence. Now, of course, one of the major points of nuclear deterrence in Europe is that the United States will back them up. So, we're on the brink of World War III, and it looks like it's going to be a nuclear holocaust. So, just wonderful news out there. Wonderful news today. Russia is super mad at Europe, and Europe seems to be totally not taking it seriously whatsoever. They're selling their long-range missiles. They're selling their fighter jets. They are moving in, France and UK are talking about sending troops to Ukraine, which is just, how tone deaf do you have to possibly be? Like, they're saying like that's what's going to happen after the war, is that the UK and France are going to deploy troops, and that they've already selected out which units they're going to send in. And the United States is looking over at Europe and France and the UK and saying, shut up. Shut up, guys. Like, you're not part of this conversation. The adults are trying to talk. And that, of course, doesn't have the Europeans very happy about that. They don't like being sidelined by this. But the European actions have made it so that they are absolutely not sitting at the seat at these tables. We have major movements forward, apparently, from Russia. Pokrovsk has now completely fallen, according to Russian authorities, has now fully fallen to Russian forces. Ukraine is disputing that and saying it's not true. It's mostly, if it's not true, it's mostly true. Okay, so exactly to what extent, do the Ukrainians have, a tiny little corner of the city still under the control? Possibly. But the Russians have controlled the downtown area for months now. So it's not really a disputed fact that they control the city. It's just how much do they not? Vovchansk has also fallen, apparently. That is a much smaller city. Pokrovsk was a major supply hub and was used to... and its rail networks and everything like that was being used to resupply Ukrainian troops at the front. This is very bad news for Ukraine. The Donbass has basically fallen. There is more land to be taken if peace is not achieved shortly. But more and more, as the days go by, what is being offered in this peace deal to Russia is basically what they already control. They are basically taking everything that they are negotiating for now. Russia is stating that they are going to create more of a buffer zone a security buffer, as they call it, on the Russian-Ukrainian border. They are going to move in and secure part of Ukraine in order to create a buffer zone to keep the Ukrainians from attacking into Russia unprovoked or whatever. And there are certain areas along the border that they have not seized this buffer zone yet, which means those invasions are probably going to be happening any day now. We're going to see new fronts open in this war. The only question is, will there be a peace deal, or will the Russians drive on Kiev? Because that's what we're down to now. We got some other big news stories out there. Just want to drop a couple other ones for you here. That the United States lost an MQ-9B Sea Guardian drone. It's a Reaper drone, basically a naval variant. Crashed off the Chinese coast on a reconnaissance mission. And Venezuela is officially protesting the United States breaching their sovereign airspace with a B-52 bomber, escorted by some, I believe, F-18s. But the thing is that this is a big deal. That's violation of international law. There's air identification zones. There's exclusive economic zones. There's a couple other ones out there, but sovereign airspace is a no-no. You don't fly aircraft, military aircraft, into other countries' sovereign airspace without consequences. So Venezuela is officially protesting this action by the United States. A B-52, on the other hand, is it's like a civilian jetliner with a few more countermeasures, but basically it's a whale in the sky. It's theoretically fairly easy to shoot down. I mean, it's not exactly a stealth aircraft by any means, and it is certainly lumbering and slow, unmaneuverable. So the fact that the United States could fly the B-52 over Venezuelan islands without any repercussions whatsoever was kind of a what are you going to do about it kind of thing. A major warning, but then also this is definitely shifting things in the direction of we're going to be moving in to attack mode on Venezuela. All right, we got that happening out there. We also have 102 airstrikes so far this year on Somalia. And yeah, we haven't talked about Somalia at all because the United States just keeps blowing people and things up in Somalia. Just last week, I didn't really mention it much. I think I mentioned it in one of the updates, but apparently a U.S. Special Operations team moved in and captured a whole bunch of Al-Shabaab terrorists. They call them ISIS, but basically all the same thing over there. Funded. These people are being funded by Minnesota. The Democrats in Minnesota are funding with government money and welfare money the terrorists over in Somalia who are apparently fighting against U.S. soldiers on the ground. So again, we're arming our opponents one way or another. All right, friends, that's kind of what's going on out there in the world. We're going to keep a close eye on what's going on with Russia and with Europe and with these tankers because blowing up civilian tankers in third-party countries like Turkish waters is not only ticking off Russia, but it's also ticking off the third countries like Turkey. Turkey is having ships blowing up in their waters, and they are not liking that. It is the Turkish Coast Guard that's going out there and rescuing these sailors and seeing the damage, and it's their waters that are being polluted by these vessels. All right, friends, thanks so much for joining with us. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.